Latest edition of Mega MNC, Anisha, my colleague, caught up with Siemens India MD and CEO Sunil Mathur, which is one of the companies that's been in focus on the back of the Capex boom in the country. So what's in store for the sector amid a manufacturing renaissance? Let's hear out.
There's a lot of interest in manufacturing. A lot of fresh capacity is coming up. Companies are looking at diversification. India is definitely a good place to be in. And we see things happening. We see real traction on the ground. So I believe it's not just a vision. That vision is slowly getting realized. And that's what makes it so exciting.
It is exciting indeed. But this is the point I want to scratch further with you. Right now, we are witnessing a very, very broad-based Capex cycle. We used to talk about the green shoots for the longest time, but those green shoots are finally materializing. But the question is, where are we in this cycle? Because it's already been 2 to 3 years that the Capex has been on an uptrend. Do you see this cycle lasting for longer? Or do you think we've peaked?
No, I don't think we peaked at all. I think when you look at Capex, particularly in infrastructure will go on for the next couple of years. India needs the infrastructure. We are looking at roads, we are looking at railways, we are looking at highways, we are looking at ports, at airports, metros in every city. There's such a huge potential in this country. So I believe this kind of Capex in infrastructure is absolutely fundamental for the country to grow. Unless you have the right infrastructure, company manufacturing becomes difficult. You need electricity, you need water, you need logistics. And again I think this is where this entire vision has been so cohesive. We've been talking about not only bringing in manufacturing, but manufacturing will not happen without logistics.
Correct.
And the government has turned around and said we want to reduce logistic costs from 13% of GDP down to 9%. A huge reduction. And they backed it up with highways coming in, with the new free passes on the toll roads and all that, speeding things up. The railways is doing an amazing job on freight there. So I think a lot of these actions are now coming together into a cohesive implementation plan.
Pretty much doing what you preach, and the entire thesis is right here in front of us of how it can actually completely revolutionize and increase the production in terms of the cost benefit as well. But coming back to India and the infrastructure bit that you were talking about, railways is one thing which is seeing a massive amount of Capex right now. See, you also bagged that big order as far as the railways is concerned, almost a 26,000 crore order.
That's right.
Coming in on the 9,000 HP locomotives. Do you see this momentum continuing? What's the order visibility like for mobility and railways?
Oh, absolutely. I think the railways has got a very structured plan. The Honorable Minister for Railways knows exactly what needs to be done. He has a background in the railways as well, and therefore he's able to articulate the vision into clear implementation. And I think he's working on it in a very structured manner. They're looking at electrification. And let me just give you an example of this. India has electrified close to 60,000 kilometers of railways. In the last 7 years, they've electrified over 30,000 kilometers of railways. That's not a small number. 32,000 is the size of the entire railway electrification network in Germany, right? India has managed to do that in 7 years, right? So that is a focus, not only from the perspective that it's the right thing to do, but from an environmental perspective, it is the right thing to do. Signaling is another area. Very clear program of what needs to be done on the signaling side. Rolling stock, and this is the order that we got. He knows precisely what kind of rolling stock is required, and you see this in the Vande Bharat trains, in the Vande Metro trains, in the locomotives, etc. There is a clear strategy in place. And that strategy is now visible to us. And that strategy is being implemented. And this is the difference. For the first time, we are seeing the railways having a strategy and actually implementing it.
True that. So I'm guessing that is one of the growth drivers for you going forward as well. But you have any type of visibility in terms of what the order infra potential can be for railways? Because as you said, a lot has been talked about, and yes, it's getting implemented as well. But any opportunity size or where we are in that cycle, what kind of uptick we can expect?
I can't give you a number, but I can tell you on electrification, we still have a way to go. On signaling, there is a way to go. There's a huge
what, we're
potential.
halfway through or even less than halfway?
I think on electrification, we are more than halfway through. We are close to completion. But on signaling, we need to accelerate that. On rolling stock, there's a huge potential. Yeah, all the trains, all the metros, all the locomotives
and
need
now
to be
the new
upgraded.
Vande Bharats, which are
The new
coming
Vande
out.
Bharat series over there. So I think we are looking at a Capex cycle of at least another 5 to 7 years there.
Wow, so 5 to 7 years, the railway capex is going to be quite strong. But, there was another order that was going to open in August itself. I think 12,000 SP. Has that worked out?
That is in the pipeline.
Okay.
And we'll see where that lands up.
But are you confident of maintaining the margins? Because, of course, with an order of that size, I'm sure the competition is also quite a bit, even from the global players. Are you confident that this would be accretive in terms of pricing and the margin?
We have to be. To be competitive in India, the margins have got to stack up. The price has to stack up. And everything in between is cost management. And that's our challenge.
Of course, you have to manage the cost and all of that. But now, are clients putting pressure to kind of pass on the price benefits of the raw material?
Most definitely. I wouldn't expect anything else.
So is that a lot of pressure right now, the renegotiations, etc.?
We've lived under pressure for 157 years.
But I'm sure the clients are talking a lot about capex and capacity expansion, given the utilizations, as you talked about, is high. But which are those industries? Is it happening across the board? Is it more traditional industries, new age tech?
I think where we are definitely seeing expansion is in areas like e-vehicles, data centers, semiconductor, fuel cells, etc. Those kind of areas where there is real traction. Data centers, e-vehicles, a lot of interest, lot of expansion happening there. But also, I think in the traditional areas, it's more brownfield, so it's more expanding capacities. What is great is that we are now, as a country, up to around 75-76% capacity utilizations. And that is terrific, because this is the time when businesses start looking at the runway ahead and saying now is the time to start either expanding sideways or expanding forward. And this is now the time when you talked about Capex cycle. We were getting up to a level up to now, and now it's a question of taking off. And I see right now the opportunity for us as a country to start really taking us to the next level in terms of expanding brownfield as well as greenfield.
Okay, so that actually answers my next question, because I was going to ask you, is it plateauing a bit or are we taking off? But you answered that we are taking off, and this is the sweet spot for you as well, right? When the utilization is high, that is when all these discussions start. But the other thing, you talked about EV, and you yourself are dabbling into it, right? You recently made an acquisition. What's the plan with respect to the EV infrastructure there?
I think EV infrastructure is going to boom here in the country. Yeah, we've just started. Again, over here, there are not only plans in place, but there are clear implementation strategies happening. And the PLI is one of them, and so on. And I think we are part of that. We want to be a part of that. The acquisition that we did is helping us to get into that area. Charging infrastructure will be critical. So you have the vehicles, e-vehicles, but they need to be charged, and they need to have the access to charging stations all over the country. And I think this is really at an inflection point where we see so much interest around the country, many new players coming on the scene, and we're talking and partnering with many of them.
Okay, that's great to hear. But you made another decision along with this EV acquisition, and that was about the transfer of the LV motor business, right? The shareholders for now have shot it down, but what's the way forward? What are you thinking about it now?
So I think the shareholders have decided. The board will now consider it, and we will see where it goes from here.
So what are the options on the table? Are you looking at completely stopping that sale, or are you looking at maybe increasing the price?
Well, I think, look, we made it clear also to the shareholders up front that the price is what it is. We also said the business is primarily
Commoditized.
We also believe we don't have the IP rights. Siemens Germany is selling it or intends to sell it at some point in time. And that was the reason why we said, let's do it now before we get into a situation where we may not have too many options on the table. The shareholders have decided, and we will have to wait and see now how the environment develops globally as well as here. And then we'll go back to the board with some ideas and see what the board says.
So, okay, so you have a difficult job at that, but sorry to pry a bit on this. Any timeline on that, clarity, A? And secondly, are there other such businesses that you do not see much value being added from, let's say, Siemens India, and which would be a better fit maybe for the parent or just to sell it off?
So we don't have a timeline for the low voltage motors business. We now accept the decision that the shareholders have taken, and we will review the options at the right time.
Okay.
For the rest of the business that you talked about, look, we continuously evaluate our businesses in terms of the market environment, in terms of the profitability, in terms of the growth possibilities. And I think the important factor for any company is to continue to evolve. And this is part of it, right? We can't ignore the environment around us, which is changing at a much faster pace today than it was 20 years ago. And we have to be ahead of that curve. Otherwise, we run the danger of being left behind. And that's our continuous endeavors.
Talk about India's energy plans as well. Seems like there's a lot of ordering happening even on the transmission side. A lot of TBCB orders are coming in. What's in the pipeline for you, let's say, from the HVDC orders and the grid stability programs that are there at play, especially on account of the renewable energy?
So let me give you the macro picture, right? As India's GDP grows at 7+% over there, as we get more industrialized in our economy, the energy usage is going to become substantially more, will double, right, in the next couple of years. And that means we will need the entire knock-on Capex that goes with it, transmission and so on. Linked to that, the government is very clear they want to expand that with renewables. They want to be a sustainable country. And when you do that, the only way you can stabilize the grid because of renewables is through grid stabilization technologies, STATCOMs, and so on. And all of that is going to come in. So I see a huge potential in the next couple of years, not only in generation of renewable energy, but also in transmission, and then the knock-on into distribution as well, where we will have to look not only on the supply side, but also at the demand side, which is what centers like this one are doing. How do you keep the demand side under control?